What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Dynasty Underdog. Billy and Jake here. Uriah decided to play hooky last minute, but we do have a fun show planned tonight, so really excited. He is having some internet issues. He may join us at some point, but we will get going here. How you doing, Jake? Before we jump into everything.
I'm doing all right, man. I don't know. Scott Fishbowl's got me all over the world. I'm just every round, every pick, it's just driving me insane. Started on Monday, had to do an auto pick. Like I preset my
Oh
rankings
my
ahead of time,
goodness,
and that was just
dude.
nuts. I was just like, I wanted to play in this so bad, and then I had to do that to start it off. Man, what about you? How are things with you?
I mean, we were just talking about it before. Like, I'm struggling right now. I'm on the clock, and I'm not gonna pick until after this show. That's what the slow clock is for, man. It's so I can take my time and make sure I do the right thing. But yeah, it's killing me this year, man. It seems like I'm in a tougher division. We're right into the news and nonsense section. We're right into the Scott Fishbowl check-in. So yeah, man, it's interesting, but it's tough being like a dynasty guy, obviously, because then like I already attacked Marvin Harrison in like the fourth round, and I'm like, was that the right thing to do? It felt good. It felt like the right thing to do, but you kind of wonder if like your dynasty brain is getting in the way of the redraft brain. And this is all for fun and charity and everything, but you know, like everything else, you want to perform well and do good. So it's just it's that struggle. It's that constant struggle of trying to make it work.
Yeah, no, I completely feel that. It's like it's another avenue for you to start making an additional name for yourself, but also at the same time, you're just there to be, participating and having fun. But at the same time, you want to win, right? Like that's the grand scheme of things. Like you want to win, no matter if I play in a league that has no buy-in or a league that has $300 buy-in. Like I still want to
Mm-hmm.
win just as bad, just because I have that competitive streak in me. So that's where I sit.
Did your strategy change at all based on like anything that happened in the draft? Like when you went into it, you had like an idea in mind based on the scoring settings and then kind of how it unfolded. Did anything change for you, or were you able to kind of execute what you kind of maybe expected to
Yeah,
happen?
that's a great question. I know we spoke about this a little bit last week, and somehow or another, I've kind of gone with the strategy I had in mind,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like it's super
Mm-hmm.
flex. I've been able to snag. I had AR at the 107. I got Trevor Lawrence at the 407, and I stacked up with Travis Kelsey and Mark Andrews. And that's really what I wanted to do, was take advantage of
Wow.
the scoring platform and scoring system with tight ends and go kind of tight end bully. I realistically probably could have gone Evan Ingram over Trevor Lawrence and gone like pure domination in this league from a tight end perspective. Might have been the more heady move. It's one of those where he went right after me, and I was just like, fuck, that actually would have made a lot of sense. But yeah, I think all in all, I've kind of gone with what I've wanted to,
Mm-hmm.
and now is really more so about filling in those peripheral pieces and taking advantage of some of the running back scoring. I think the wide receivers will be able to take further advantage of through outlets like players who have return value, maybe
Mm-hmm.
rather than
Yep.
just pure receiving value. What about you?
Yeah, no, that's a great point there at the end with, being able to scrape by with receivers who are, working through special teams, which is definitely a possibility in this league. I like the way you executed that though, getting the rushing quarterback in the middle of the first round still, where like typically you have to be up at the top and get like Lamar, Allen, Hurts, whatever. Kind of like I did. I went Hurts and at the 102 because I wanted that mixture of rushing and my quarterback still, not go Christian McCaffrey and worry about, the potential of losing that, and then you're kind of done. But I like the way you were able to execute that, and then you get Travis Kelsey and Mark Andrews. Or, I mean, right? Travis Kelsey and
Yeah.
Mark Andrews both. Yeah, like that's it. Travis Kelsey didn't fall in our league, so I saw that happen in a couple, and I love that start to the draft because I think it's very unique. For me, I went Hurts and then Andrews, and it set me up for kind of a tough spot when you go tight end second there, and also I'm on the bad side of the third round reversal, so coming back around, I did change my strategy a little bit based on the settings. I wanted to go a little bit more zero, but I was like, you got to kind of adjust with the board, and so I took Kyron there in that third round, and I'm kind of going hero running back with that. So I don't love the team, but it's different than what I do, and sometimes you have to be different in these tournaments. You have to adjust to the board, right? You can't just like stick to your guns and be like, I'm going to do my strategy no matter what. That's kind of how you fail. So I'm happy that I could adjust, but it's definitely been a struggle. So all right, cool. That's enough Scott Fishbowl. Enough Scott Fishbowl. We don't need to be stressing out about it on here, but we're going to stress about it later.
You'll text me. I know. It's okay.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. Right after the pod. No, we won't even get off here until I make the pick. That's what's going to happen. This is a good question though, real quick. Is this your only tight end bully build? Like, do you do this in Dynasty at all? Like, have you tried to approach a Dynasty league with that, like, stacking a top 2-3 tight end type thing?
Yeah, it's a great question. Funny enough, one of the builds that I have from a startup this year is kind of tight end bully unintentionally. I was able to find Kyle Pitts at a relatively decent price. Already had Mark Andrews, and I have another top 12 tight end. I forgot who it is. It's someone like an Evan Ferguson or Pat Fry.
Evan Ferguson? Wow.
Sorry.
Wow, we just combined Evan Ingram and Jake Ferguson. That guy would be a stud.
Yeah, dude. That dude would be a stud. Yes, one of those. Jake Ferguson. I believe it's Jake Ferguson. And I find myself, relatively comfortable where I do think that there is some value gain to be had when you do have a tight end bully, especially in a league that doesn't understand tight end premium. So, being able to kind of see what that fallout looks like, all with relatively young assets, is going to be really interesting, I think, in about 12 months' time.
Yeah,
what
absolutely.
About you?
And I've definitely done this quite a few times. I think in the latest league that you and I drafted in that Legends League, I think I did it with, I believe, Mark Andrews and George Kittle. And I've done it a couple of times with that combo because it's this really nice mixture of getting what I perceive to be as, a top 1-2 tight end in Andrews and another guy in Kittle, who I think has that like top 5 potential, and you get him really cheap. You know what I mean? Are cheaper than most of the other elite type tight ends, those elite producers. So that's kind of the direction I go in when I try to build it in the past couple seasons, because it's just good value you can extract, and nobody's really adjusted. We've still seen that to this point. So definitely can execute that in Dynasty, and I think you can do some fun things with it and be successful. So okay, cool. Let's jump into the war on film. I don't know how long we'll spend on this exactly, but I thought this was interesting. I've seen this kind of in general from the community, like just parts of the community, just kind of trying to, I think, take shots at how technical we've gotten with film analysis, right? And how nuanced we've gotten with film analysis. But it's come from a larger publication now. And I love the Levitard show and Levitard and Friends. That's honestly probably where a lot of like my on-camera personality or on air personality, however you want to put that, comes from, because I've listened to them since I was in college probably. And I love those guys. But Pablo Torre had a very interesting, thought on film, and it was basically that we're getting too technical and we're saying things that we don't even know what we're talking about, right? Or we're just saying things that sound fancy to sound like we know what we're talking about, but do we even know what we're looking at? And I thought it was an interesting proposition, to think about. And kind of, he was talking about the language we're using, the jargon, which is something actually I find fairly important to learn. And I think a lot of this kind of stuff sometimes like comes from ignorance, right? Like it's being afraid sometimes, or being uncomfortable. It's like, I don't know what they're saying. It happens to me all the time where like you're looking at a play and that a professional or quarterback is breaking down former quarterback, and you're like, damn, I didn't know that. Like I need to go learn what he's talking about. You know what I mean? And sometimes you get that, you're like, damn, I didn't know that. And it's frustrating. But I think at some level, people on the other side of it get really frustrated by it because they're not as interested in learning about it. And then it becomes this thing where they kind of lash out about, I think, the lack of understanding. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's actually a really great way to sum it up, right? Like being stuck,
fetishizing jargon. That's what he called it, fetishizing jargon.
And I think it's a completely valid argument. I like from like a high end perspective. But I do think, to your point, there is something really kind of attractive about the nuance of, as lame as this sounds, because it's going to sound like very like work speak, but like a subject matter expert, right? Like there's a reason why these players, these athletes are paid as much as they are. There's a reason why the coaching staffs are paid as much as they are. Like they should be understanding the game itself at a much higher level than we are. And that the purpose of the fetishization to the Le Batard show's point, is like kind of detracting from what actually is occurring. I think the game itself is actually moving in a significantly more technical space. I think the understanding and intelligence level of the athletes themselves is moving to a significantly higher standard, and therefore you're having athletes perform not necessarily at a higher standard, but you are sick, like you're seeing it from a statistical standpoint at bare minimum, but from also an intelligence standpoint of how they're actually reading the game rather than just going off of just straight pure athleticism. You're starting to see that from a much higher level due to the extreme gaps of, for bare instance, for quarterback touchdown interception ratio, right? Like you had league changers like a Brett Favre or an Eli Manning. That's a joke, but folks like that, where their general premise was to basically score as many points as possible without really the concern of how they're going to impact their team play. And now you're seeing like game intelligence have such a higher standard, where you're starting to see guys like a Brock Purdy, who I think his game intelligence incredibly high level, mixed with fair athleticism, driving relatively high results in the NFL. And I think this concern of other people becoming, almost like more educated than us is a dying idea. We get kind of stuck in it in every facet. What are your thoughts?
That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, like, you bring up a lot of points. I think a big part of this also is like trying to educate the audience, right? Like that's a big part of it too, is like trying to teach them what like a guy like Brock Purdy is doing, right? Because we have these guys coming in doing things from a much more cerebral level, and then you're trying to explain like how this is happening from a scheme standpoint. And yeah, like it does get technical, right? Like anything that you're going to learn, there are technical terms or technical aspects of it that you may not have understood before. And I think frustration in all forms, in your regular life, in business, whatever, can come from, not knowing, can come from ignorance, lack of knowledge. And I think that's kind of what happens here. And it's like, same thing happens when I look at like a piece of data and I'm like, I don't know how they got to that data. I really want to know how they got there. And this is pissing me off and I don't even like it anymore. And then you kind of get to the point where you diminish the work for some reason compared to other analysis, right? So now it's like you're diminishing the film analysis because you don't understand it compared to data analysis because it may be easier for you to interpret. And I think that's kind of where my brain went with this whole thing, is I just think it's a lack of understanding sometimes. And I get it, because in the past it's like, just, we run the ball, we throw the ball left, right. You know what I mean? But now it's like zone schemes and cover ones and shells, and everybody's like, what are we talking about? But it's an evolving game. And so I think we have to evolve with it. And then you have more players, that are cerebral coming back to the game and trying to explain to you what is going on and what they were doing. You're only going to get more of this. Now we have Tom Brady in the booth. Please, good luck.
I think you brought up a lot of great points, honestly, and it drew like a freaking galaxy of thoughts. Like I have so many, and I will try and just derive it into a singular question, so we can kind of move this on. But what are your thoughts of the idea that the game is constantly changing? And there's a comment by AJ stating like each scheme has its own language too, but the concepts are super similar. I think it's an incredibly important point that's brought up actually in Hard Knocks this current season with the Giants. Brian Dable asks a question to, I believe it was Jane Daniels, and Jane Daniels uses some language that doesn't necessarily fit the Giants' terminology within their own scheme. But Dable basically says like, oh, it's the same thing as X. And, that's really interesting. But here's kind of where I see the potential nuance is someone like a Tony Romo, right? Because you brought up Tom Brady, and this is exactly where my brain went. Tony Romo, to an extent, is almost phasing out, in my opinion, to having that kind of higher level understanding of the game from when he played 7-8 years ago. And we're kind of seeing that. He's unable to kind of adjust to the newer schemes, the newer offenses, and the ways in which players are currently reading the game. He still gets kind of individual standpoints, but like if we saw him from just like an ability to understand and kind of predict the future, if you remember in his like first few seasons, he was able to read up schemes from both offense and defense and see how a quarterback would interact with that space. he can't do that anymore. And so do we think that even someone at the extremely high level like Tom Brady is going to fall into that same bucket? Or do you think someone like Tom Brady continues to educate himself, doesn't fall into that bucket of, being at war on film? Instead, he wants to constantly educate himself, kind of like he's reading a book, in the sense of like, and that's why I find this really funny, because when you think about it from like a very elementary standpoint, right, where if you read a singular book, there's going to be a word in that fucking book that you don't understand, right? Like, are you just not going to look up the definition of the book and just assume? Yeah, exactly. Are you just not going to look up the definition of the word and just go purely on context? Like, is that really what you're going to do every single time? The answer is no, if you're relatively intelligent. And I think that's kind of the question we have to ask ourselves as consumers of new information, right? Like, it's kind of ridiculous.
Yes. So, well, it's funny. I made notes about this earlier. And one of the things I said is, when this happens to me, I want to go and just figure it out. I want to know what the answer is. I don't just want to live in that frustration and be upset at the other side. So generally generally what happens is I come to understand that side of things. And I'm like, oh, okay, there's some value here that I can maybe, pull out of this. So that's part of it. But what you were talking about with Brady and Romo, I mean, they're two very different levels of quarterback football minds, let's say, right? So I think there's that part of it. Like, I'm thinking back, so neither one of us maybe can necessarily remember the arc of John Madden, but it seemed like he had it until the end. And I feel like if you're a student of the game in that way, which is kind of how I think of Brady is, he probably will be able to maintain that kind of knowledge longer and continue to learn. But I also wonder if Tony Romo was told by a network, the network, whatever, like, chill out because of potential pushback, if he was wrong on predicting these plays. Like, there's been a lot of talk about Tony Romo from the time that he started and from the time, to where he is now, in a lot of different shows I listen to, football shows. And a lot of people have suggested that may be kind of what has gone on. That's not an original thought of mine. I'm not going to take credit for that, but I do think that is potentially, a part of what could be happening there. And something that I also think a Tom Brady, John Madden, those kind of guys are maybe more impervious to, right? Like, who's going to be telling these guys to chill? Like, they're probably going to be right more than not. And also, they're probably not going to listen to you as much. You know what I mean? You're not going to have as much power over those guys. So, we're way off the rails today. This is super interesting and fun conversations, but we're way off the rails. I love it.
Let's keep it moving. Sorry about that. No, I said, you had my mind going all over the place, and I felt like I needed to say additional words.
This is what we're here for. Yeah. No, this is what we're here for. All right, let's bring it back to Dynasty. I have one in the news and nonsense for Dynasty. Is Pearsall a buy low, or is he still too early? Because we are hearing a ton of concern about him already, right? And I'm just wondering if it's like not unfounded, but should have already kind of been baked into his price, his analysis, or his evaluation, or your evaluation, whose ever evaluation of that player, because he was coming into a team that had Ayuk and Deebo Samuel, and they talked about wanting to keep Ayuk this whole time, right? Like, they do want him there. Ayuk has been the one who has been kind of leaking, like, they clearly don't want me because they're not giving me what I want. But we can't really just, go into any kind of situation and expect that a guy's not going to be there that's there. You have to kind of just, I think the evaluation has to have that baked in. So are you concerned? Do you think that you would be going out and buying him maybe now? I mean, we were looking, I'll just leave it with that. Go ahead. Would you buy him right now?
No, I don't think I would buy him right now. I think I would want kind of that flattening out of his value to kind of surface from just I'm a little conservative on Pearsall. I was a little conservative with him going into the draft. I think I was a little bit lower than consensus. Personally, didn't necessarily love his tape. And then I was a little bit lower than consensus after the draft, to be honest, because I did think that wide receiver room was really crowded. George Kittle, incredibly important to that offense. What is he? Target 5 probably after McCaffrey, right? So it's like, what type of role does he have? We needed someone to move for him to really move up in my own internalized rankings. So no, I just don't think that there is really, honestly, I just don't think there's a buy low opportunity unless there's maybe an individual micro owner who's like, oh, I'm scared shitless right now because Ayuk is going to stay and Debo is going to stay. What about you?
Yeah, I'm actually just looking at the his value right now, just in terms of ADP. Like, there's literally like I think maybe one or two players in this area that I'd be willing to trade for him, like a James. Oh no, that's not even who I thought it was. Oh my goodness. But
I
yeah,
know what
not
you're
not
about
even
to
really.
say. I
Yeah,
knew
and
what
it
you were
wasn't, and
about
he's
to.
not there. He's not in that range. I'm looking at the wrong guy. That was Javonte Williams, and I might do that actually anyway. But David Montgomery, maybe you can move for there. But there's so many players around here that I would trade Pearsall for. Is kind of where I was getting at.
Yep.
And it's like Deontay Johnson, even a Godwin who I was talking about last week, who we'll talk about more today. We'll talk about a ton of these players actually today in our next segment, but it seems like he actually might be a sell looking at this. And if there's like this idea of fragility, kind of like I'm talking about, that, oh, like he's a buy, you know what I mean? Then
Yep.
yeah, maybe we should be selling. And I have quite a few shares sitting on the taxi. I might be doing some shopping around later on today. So
You're welcome.
all right, that's interesting. Yeah. So the answer is no. We should not be buying Pearsall right now. Still too early. Not me. Okay. All right, let's hop into it. Next segment here, we are going into Family Feud. I thought this was a really fun way to frame this topic. I want to talk about teammates that we prefer at cost. All right, we're going to run through a bunch of combinations here. We're going to start with the Indianapolis Colts. At cost, who would you rather have, Michael Pittman or A.D. Mitchell? Looking at Michael Pittman at 49th overall, wide receiver 18. A.D. Mitchell 114 overall, wide receiver 47. Obviously, these guys are not the same, player right now. Michael Pittman is the wide receiver 1, or the predicted wide receiver 1 on this team. A.D. Mitchell's a rookie. Adonai Mitchell, I think that's what he wants to be called, is a rookie. But he's showing out in camp, and he's considerably cheaper. How do you feel about these guys?
Yeah, I think Pittman is really at the apex of his value arc, and I don't like buying players then. So I would have to just choose AD Mitchell from a pure consumer standpoint. I probably am like realistically at cost, I'm probably staying away from both unless I can truly get AD at cost, which I don't think I can. So because I've tried multiple times. And yeah, that's kind of where I sit. What about you?
Yeah, I think you could trade quite a few of the running backs in like that value range of A.D. Mitchell. Like I would trade, like I've already traded Zamir White, and he's going ahead of him. And there's quite a few other guys I think behind him that I'd be willing to move for A.D. Mitchell. So I think his price is pretty palatable, and definitely compared to Michael Pittman, who's sitting up in between guys like Kyle Pitts, Mark Andrews in that range. And please, for the love of everything, give me one of those guys. If I had Pitt, I would love to sell Pittman at those prices right now. And I'm not a Pittman hater. I think he's a fine player, but he's just not a dominant X guy, and he's never been a dominant producer in the NFL. And I don't expect him to as they add more talent. So I only think I do agree with you. He's kind of at that peak. And I'd much rather attack that Mitchell value. And I think that he could definitely overtake, there's a world where he overtakes Michael Pittman in a year or two as, the go-to guy on that team. It's definitely possible. I don't think it's highly likely, but it's definitely possible.
Yep.
Okay, let's jump over to Pittsburgh. We're going to the backfield. This is kind of an obvious one, but it's a very interesting one. These guys are super close together. Najee Harris, 104 overall, running back 25. Warren goes just behind him, 116th overall, and at running back 29. I tend to lean Najee, man. I just tend to lean the better talented player. That's pretty much it. Like I think they'll both catch, similar amount of passes or see similar amount of targets. Like, Warren may see more, but it's definitely possible that Najee leads in both rushing and receiving on that team. And it's going to be a run-heavy offense, and I think he's kind of the guy that you want to lean on. So while they're both priced similarly, one's a little bit cheaper. Yeah, I tend to just lean into that talent. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, honestly, I'd probably lean into almost usage more than talent. And we saw it last year. So many people thought that Warren was going to take a larger chunk of the snaps, which at first, that's what it looked like was going to end up happening. And then Najee, honestly, rounded out the year relatively well. That kind of put us in a much better situation to understand, I think, just generally how Tomlin sees the running back room. I know he's not necessarily the offensive coordinator, but I do think that head coaches do tend to kind of drive usage more than people like to think. And yeah, with this small of gap, I would rather go with what I believe is the definitive RB1, even if it's like more of like a RB1.5.
Like Najee Harris is sitting behind like Montgomery, Javonte Williams. He could easily outperform those players, you know? Like,
Yep.
I think, yeah, I don't know. We're as much as Javonte, as much as Najee is a really distasteful player in terms, like that's not a good way to say it. As much as you hate rostering Najee because it's just not fun, I do think that there's some value there. Like it just seems like he's just too low on the board. So I kind of like that value just looking at where he's going, and I think that's something you can attack down the road. You don't need to do it now, that's for sure. But I like that. Okay, let's jump over to the Chiefs. This is super interesting, right? We're talking about 3 different players here. We're talking about Marquise Brown, Rashee Rice, and Xavier Worthy. And it's crazy how much higher Xavier Worthy's going. Xavier Worthy, I don't know if I say that right. Xavier Worthy's going than these guys. 66 overall for Xavier Worthy, wide receiver 25. 78th overall for Rashee Rice, wide receiver 34. 111 overall, wide receiver 46 for Marquise Brown. I mean, take it away, Jake. I have a feeling I'm going to agree with you here.
Contending, I'm going Marquise Brown every single day of the week. Probably if I'm rebuilding, I'm trying to get off of Marquise Brown mid-season. Like I don't believe in his current value. I think the dude's still like 26, 27 years old. It's not like he's anywhere near being quote unquote washed in the Dynasty fantasy football community. This is prime time to acquire a guy who's on a 1-year contract. And this is kind of when these dudes bump in value, right? Like perfect landing spot. He was kind of screwed last year with the Kyler injury. He himself dealt with injuries. Like this is where you kind of want to land on a dude who's already shown wide receiver 1 upside in other situations in Baltimore and Arizona. So yeah, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely tend to lean in that direction. Like if I'm going like a 1-year, just like I need to get a guy, like Marquise Brown seems so cheap on this team. Like I wouldn't even look at any of these other guys as, targets on one of the best offenses in the league. So yeah, I understand obviously why Worthy is is getting pushed up there. But man, that's rich. Like, I mean, I guess it's in a decent range overall, but you're looking around like the T. Higgins and I mean, yeah, I guess that's where you're going to have to go. But okay, so talking about Rashee Rice, 78th overall, right? He's going around later. Similar value. Do you think that you would try to trade up from Rice to get to Worthy if you had him? Like, would you feel comfortable trying to do that and getting out of Rice, or would you rather just stick with what you've seen from Rice?
It's a good question. Personally, even though I was one of the few people hyping up Rice pretty early on last year while you were out on parental leave,
you took advantage. Damn it.
Needed to spat some shit on the mic. So I did. And I think like the reality is that he's kind of a ceiling player that we really saw what his ceiling was, I think, in his rookie year due to what that wide receiver room looked like. There wasn't really any type of target competition. I think it says a lot that the Kansas City Chiefs basically pre-suspension or we don't know if there's suspension, but like pre-altercation had already kind of filled that wide receiver room up significantly better than it was 12 months ago. I personally would be getting off of Rice if I could. And if I could find something like, Rice plus a second or something to get up to Worthy, I'd probably do something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about. Yeah. Okay. Because the question, if that wasn't the case, would be, would you move back from Worthy to Rice? But I don't think I would either. And I think that I would try to move off Rice and go for the more high upside player. Because no matter what, I think that now with what they've done, Rashee Rice is going to be running, these little slant routes all day long. Like that's all he's going to be. He's going to have another ADOT of, what was it, like 4 yards?
Yeah.
It's going to happen again. It's going to be like 5 yards. You know what I mean? It's going to go up a little bit, but not much because he's just not going to have much of the field to work with Marquise Brown and Xavier Worthy, working more of the space, I think, downfield. So, yeah, I kind of agree with you there.
Question. Right. If you're contending, would you trade Worthy for Brown in a second? I'm sorry, Brown in a first?
Yes, I would.
Yeah.
That's a great question. That's a great question. I was actually trying to figure, I wanted to ask that, but I was like, no, that doesn't work for Dynasty, but that's a great way to frame it. Yes. You would need to get a significant plus on Brown and I think you could definitely do that. And maybe you'd have to go like 2 seconds or like a player you view as like a late first, like an older vet plus Marquise Brown, but a guy who still has dynasty value. Yeah, I would want to do that especially if I'm contending, bolster my roster. I don't believe in Worthy that much. I believe in him just a lot more than I believe in Rashee Rice. We know who the odd man out. Family Feud has been decided. Rice is out the door. All right. Damn. No porridge for you. All right. So, Jesus. All right. Another backfield. So we're switching back and forth right now between wide receivers and running backs. We're moving over to the Rams. Very large gap here in values. So we'll see where the conversation goes. But Kyren Williams, 46 overall, running back 9, very, very expensive. Blake Corum, 112 overall, running back 27. All right, and in that range, you're looking at the Tyjae Spears, just Tony Pollard's, those kind of players, Jamison Williams, just give you an idea of the range of values that's in this area. Yeah, how do you feel about this backfield, man? It's been topic of conversation for sure.
Yeah, I think I'm a broken record, honestly, about my running back takes, but this is really where I fade running backs in general. I think Kyren basically sits at the peak of his value, and so I see myself really. I would always want the running back 2 in a room like this if I could buy it at cost. So I'd probably go Corum over Kyren personally in a dynasty landscape. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I could definitely. Yeah, I mean, I probably would do that, especially in like a startup. I'd prefer not to pay up for a Kyren who he thinks at peak value at this point. So yeah, I mean, yeah, if we have to choose between the two, I'm probably going Corum. I want to stop for a second. Somebody, this is all I'm thinking about is this question.
Great question.
We sure Rashee Rice's route tree can't expand. Seemed like a lot of rookies last year had that similar low ADOT, high manufactured play kind of thing going on. He mentions Zay, Flowers, Jaden Reed, etc. Jaden Reed, I think, maybe more fits that bill. I think Zay Flowers was doing a little bit more versatile things than Rashee Rice was doing. Ability to get downfield, after the catch ability, I think, in traffic, those kind of things. A little bit more dynamic. You could throw JSN in there, kind of the manufactured low ADOT stuff. And we expect him to his route tree to expand. So it's a fair question. It comes back to ability and talent for me. And I could definitely be shortchanging the kid again. I did it when he came out of college. I can't deny that. So I could be wrong about him, but I see that they've added so many weapons that do different things than him and that do more of the dynamic things that it's just going to be hard for him, even if he can expand that route tree. Is he going to get the opportunity to actually work on it in game as much? Or is it really going to be more like in practice? Yeah, he's working to, improve and evolve his game, but these other guys are really the ones getting those looks. So it's just tough for me to kind of spin it up in my head and create the story where it works out for him. But I've been wrong before. So I don't know, Jake, do you have any different thoughts on that?
No, I think that's exactly right. And I feel like whenever we're on together, this is usually what happens. We just agree with one another. But
this Raya, come on, bro.
Seriously, we need some contending opinions right now. But I think the reality is the moves in which were made by the Chiefs say more to me about how they value Rice's ability to expand his own route tree rather than him being able to do it himself. So I think he's kind of capped by the evaluation of the team that he's on. Whether or not he can physically do it is a completely different story, but being able to kind of fill out that wide receiver room with truly more expansive wide receivers that kind of fill into what he wasn't able to do as a rookie, I think says more than anything else for me.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I wanted to really quickly grab Zay Flowers ADOT just because I wanted to see what it was. I forgot, so I'm looking right now. 8.4, which is like double of what what a Rashee Rice was seeing last year. So just like, I'm not taking like a rocket shot or anything. I just know that his was considerably lower than most. And just from watching Zay Flowers, you know that he was doing a little bit more downfield. So yeah, and not just using that one example. I just think we just talked about a couple of them and I think why we think that. So, okay, we can move on.
Shout out to Chris though. Thanks, Chris, for the question.
Yeah, Chris, great question. Absolutely. Seriously, great question. We're always getting great questions. Hop into the YouTube channel. We love interacting with you guys. So yeah, do more of it. It's awesome. Moving over to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I've been talking about Godwin a bit the past couple of weeks, but let's talk about them in tandem. Godwin at 105 overall, wide receiver 42. Evans 77 overall, wide receiver 33. Is it enough of a gap for you to, consider Godwin at all over a guy like Evans?
Yeah, honestly, I think it is enough of a gap considering the age differentiation between the two of them. We are talking about Dynasty. I think I could probably get 3 out of potentially even 4 seasons out of Chris Godwin. Mike Evans is, sitting in that 1-year window every single season, and that's kind of where I find him. It's okay. I know I sound so stupid every year where I'm like, this is going to be it. This is the last one. But realistically, that's kind of the window you're sitting at from a value perspective. I don't think anyone who owns Mike Evans last year thought that they would be able to sell him again at the start of the season for a first. What about you?
Yeah, that's fair. Man, Mike Evans is going to have a pretty solid year, I think, but I wonder if I could trade Mike Evans for Godwin plus, but it probably can't. Yeah, probably can't do that. I don't know. Man, I'd probably just go with the tried and true Evans here. It's not that much of a difference of a
that's fair,
of a price, right? Like it's a couple rounds, I guess, but not much. And
it's 2.5.
Yeah. I mean, if you can get a plus on that, I would love to move off of Mike Evans and get Godwin because I do think he's going to have a bounce back year. So I would definitely do like I think I could take Godwin in a third and call it a day. I'd be happy with that. I think you're going to get maybe similar production. That's a tough one.
I don't know if you'll get similar production.
Similar, but
yeah, it's a different type of production.
I guess you're going to get a more consistent floor, I guess, but that's not really what you want always.
Yes.
So I guess it's how your team is structured. If you need like that, but yeah, I guess if you have enough upside running throughout your team, you could maybe take that on. But in the third's not really going to do enough for you.
Yeah, I think it'd have to be a second, honestly.
A second, probably would. Yeah, probably
which I think will be tougher, but it's a good offer to send out there. Honestly, if you do have something like that, let us know if you've ever capitalized off of Godwin in a second for Evans.
I mean, I'm sitting here and I'm like, hold on. I could literally look at the trades on the screen. I don't know what I'm doing.
And you can add
Mike
the players
Evans,
too, I think, right?
I mean, yeah, I probably could. I'm just kind of looking what he's gone for. It's like a lot of trade ups, but yeah. Would you move off of Mike Evans for any first right now?
Yes. Well, it would really depend on my build, honestly, and kind of how it's structured. But I think I could use that first in so many other ways that would help my team longer term than kind of get stuck with Mike Evans.
Yeah, I feel that. Would you move from Mike Evans to Pickens for Mike Evans plus a third to Pickens? That seems pretty easy,
yeah. This goes into almost like an underdog under the hood situation of like acquiring assets you don't particularly like, but knowing that you're winning the deal. I think this is, yes, I would be acquiring Pickens at a decent cost. Do I love this for myself? No, but I would do it.
Yeah. I think you're going to get more return on your investment in the next couple months by doing that. Those are tough players for me to value for some reason, man. Like Evans and Godwin, and like how exactly to approach those two on that team. Because I think they're going to both have very good years. And I think that Godwin's going to have a much better year than last year. So there's some value in Godwin for sure, but we've talked about that enough. All right, let's move over to another interesting one, similar to the Kansas City Chiefs, right? We're going over to a really high-profile passing offense in Houston, and they have 3 pretty damn good weapons. And we're looking at Nico Collins, these guys have been topic of conversation on Dynasty Underdog for a while, but it's been a while since we've discussed. So Nico Collins, 45th overall, wide receiver 16. Tank Dell, 60th overall, wide receiver 22. And Stephon Diggs, 88th overall, wide receiver 36. And that's pretty nice deal for a Stephon Diggs. If you've been drafting the past couple of years, you know that is not where he's been. But is it enough to kind of like believe in him as having like wide receiver one upside in that offense at any time, just week to week even? I don't know. How would you approach this wide receiver room?
I'd probably vacate it completely, honestly. I know it sounds extreme. Yeah.
Altogether.
Yeah.
Just sell it off.
Yes. Yeah.
That's a great code. Yeah, I love it.
The only player that I've been able to acquire in this window since Diggs came over was Dell, and I was able to acquire him. We'll talk about this in Underdog Under the Hood, but I was able to acquire him for a 27 first, basically. That's the type of place where I kind of see his value at. It's so far out that I'm willing to take that risk for the next basically 3 seasons, knowing that I can hopefully get that return back. But man, I just don't. I think all their costs are so inflated for what their potential production could be. It's just such an up in the air window and group that I feel pretty scared of it. What about you?
Yeah, I think the values have risen considerably since the trades we've made. I made a trade in Legends, and it was Terry McLaurin in a second for Tank Dell, and I don't know if that's getting done right now. Like it's definitely like a fine deal either way. It's not like anybody blew anybody out of the water, but wide receiver 20. No, I'm just saying wide receiver 22 and Terry McLaurin's wide receiver 38. That's a very large gap.
Yeah.
So it just kind of shows you how much the value's risen there. And I think you might have a point. Dell, I think, is a little bit easier to hold. He's kind of just sitting in the middle there. But Diggs, I think you could still probably get out of him right now for a decent price. And you might want to just do that, especially, in an offense that has 3 guys who are just good. Like, there's just no doubt about it. But if I could turn Diggs plus something into a Higgins, I'd probably do that. I'm seeing one here like Diggs for Tyjae Spears and Polk, and I don't really love that. But if I could get maybe one of those players to be a little different, I might be on board with like a better player than Polk is kind of what I mean. But
what about Spears in a second?
Yeah, that's just kind of the same thing, I guess. But
except it's more fluid, probably, right?
It's more fluid. Yeah, absolutely. Much more liquidity there and time for things to grow and play with. So yeah, I would do that. I think I would do that for sure.
Yeah, same.
Move off Diggs. And then, we haven't mentioned Nico, but we've been kind of preaching this for a while now. But that wide receiver 16 is very much of what you described about, who was it? Michael Pittman, right? Where he's kind of at his peak value. And it doesn't feel like much room to grow. I think I saw what's his name, Dynasty Zoltan, talking about how he's at the bottom of a tier and he should be at the top of a tier. And it doesn't quite seem that way from what I'm looking at, or from that value wide receiver 16. Like, how much higher does he have to go? Like, I guess they view him as a top 12 guy, and there's just too many talents that are already in there and that are coming out that I just don't think he's going to be able to maintain that. So, yeah, I think I would vacate as much of this as possible, but I'd probably hold Dell if I could. And there's no reason to move off Dell. He's super young. You got, time. Not super young, I shouldn't say. He's 24, but I think he has a long career ahead of him. So,
sure.
Yeah. Okay. How about the Packers? And I'm not including Dontavian Wicks in here. I want to just talk about Jaden Reed, because I know you'd pick Wicks. That's why. So, so I want to talk about Jaden Reed at 79th overall, wide receiver 35, and Christian Watson 109th overall, wide receiver 44. I'm just going to tell you right now, I think I would go Christian Watson. Like, I like Jaden Reed a lot. I liked him coming out a lot, but the value here is too good for me. If I could move off of Reed for Watson in like a second or something like that, or maybe even a little bit extra, like I would like to be doing that. And just his price suggests that that's possible. Like it's almost what, a 3 or 4 round difference. So
2.5, yeah.
2.5 round difference. Yeah. Okay. So, I guess a second straight is what you'd be looking at, kind of thing. But I think I'd still be doing that because I think both of these guys have kind of a similar chance of succeeding at a high level, and Christian Watson has just as much pop, I think, as Jaden Reed, if not more, when he's healthy. You see the reports of him finding out that Christian Watson, finding out that he had an imbalance in his hamstrings, and that was what was causing so many of these injuries to his hamstrings, and that he's really, really been working with specialists to get this thing right. And he didn't know about this before. So if you know about it now, I'd expect things to get a little bit better. It doesn't mean that it's going to completely fix itself. There's always a chance that he is one of those guys that you can label injury prone, right? We don't necessarily believe in that, but this right here suggests that he may be able to overcome that. And that's his biggest issue. So I've never been the Christian Watson truther, but I think just looking at it, I kind of like his value more. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I personally wouldn't trade Reed for Watson plus. That's just me personally. I do think that I agree with you that Watson's upside is higher, but I think with what I can do with Reed from just a pure liquidity standpoint right now makes the most amount of sense. I've done it already twice in this offseason, getting somewhere between the 109 to the 111 and, basically flipping Reed for Brian Thomas Jr., Jonathan Brooks, or Xavier Worthy feels really, really competent to me in terms of how I'm using my assets and kind of staying away from someone like Christian Watson. This wide receiver room is another one where I personally say stray away from. There's no reason to try and make your bets on things that you don't really understand. I know that sounds really douchey, but we just don't get it. So why make those bets? And to your point, I know you said it, but we are going to really talk about Dontavian Wicks in the sense that I think if you want to make a bet on that wide receiving group, the dude is so cheap in comparison, depending on the leagues that you're in and depending on who the owners are. He could be worth just that throwaway early third, late second. It really just depends. There's other assets too that are kind of in his range that you could get one for one. That would be significantly more worth it than even throwing out a pick, in my opinion. But I'm not here saying Dontavian Wicks is going to win that room. I'm just saying if you want to throw a dart, that feels like the dart to throw.
Yeah, he is by far the latest of all the wide receivers, even beyond Romeo Doubs, who's at 145. Wicks is still at 160. So that's definitely something you can take advantage of. There's Gabe Davis and Malachi Corley's and Rashid Shaheed's in that area, and that's what you should be kind of looking to do. Jake's definitely right on that. But just looking at Reed versus Watson, just so everybody knows, looking at the splits, Watson is there. Reed is seeing 4.9 targets. When he's not, he's seeing 7.
Yep.
Right. And when Watson is there, it's 11.3 PPR points per game. When he's not, it's 16.5. It's a significant difference when Watson's been on the field and when he hasn't. So if you think Watson is straight cooked and he's not going to be on the field, okay. When he's on the field, it's been a problem for Reed. So we'll see if he can overcome it this season. But that's kind of damning.
It is.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Let's move on to the Panthers. Looking at Xavier Legette, 110 overall, wide receiver 45. Deontay Johnson, 115 overall, wide receiver 48. What the fuck are y'all doing?
We don't even need to waste any time on this. It's Deontay.
What are we doing?
Deontay is so hated in the world of football. I don't really get it. I do think that Deontay falls into that bucket of someone who is incredibly competent and then kind of falls and flutters in the red zone channel. He's the guy that you see so many highlights of drop passes in the red zone. And, I think
the Calvin Ridley syndrome kind of thing.
Yes, exactly. And I do think that it kind of discredits all of the additional work that he does to get his team so close to the end zone. And therefore it kind of devalues him, which is great for the rest of the fantasy owners who want to go out and buy Deontay, because I think he's a smash buy.
Dude, I'm looking at some of the most head-scratching trades right now. These both happened on 7/9. So 3 days ago, 2 days ago?
2 days ago, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Deontay Johnson in a second for Rashee Rice. Yeah, obviously. But then this one, Javon Baker, Taysom Hill, and Blake Watson for Deontay Johnson. Like, what? Wan'Dale Robinson, 2 fourths and a third for Deontay Johnson. That's the same 2 days. All these are 2 days ago. That's like, I can't even understand it. And this is a guy who points per game last year, he had 10.5 in a bad year points per game, which isn't good. But then you're looking at, I mean,
he also had Mason Rudolph throwing him the ball.
Yeah, I mean,
Kenny Pickett injured, and who ended up, he's now a backup quarterback in the NFL, right? Like,
yeah, I like the situation for him. He's going to be a target hog, and when he gets targets, the guy catches the ball. So, like, I'm not really worried about him. I think he's going to have a seriously great floor. I think it's, in that 12 to 15 points per game range, and that's great. Like, and for the value, it's insane. Like, that's going to fill your flex spot for dirt cheap. So go out there and do it. I think we're a little too high on Leggett. We didn't really mention him at all, but I mean, that's just too high. Like,
and it's not discrediting Leggett by any means. Like, I'm not saying that he can't make a role for himself in his rookie year. It's just more so like, go out and buy the proven commodity when you can.
Yeah, absolutely. I do agree with that, but I'm trying to find Leggett now on this screen. He's in the Marquise Brown. I'm just trying to think, like, I mean, he's going right around Calvin Ridley. Like, there's these Ricky Pearsall and Leggett, man. Like, we need to be looking as contenders for opportunities to move on. We really do. Yeah. Okay, that's interesting. We just mentioned this guy's name, Jalen Polk, 128 overall, wide receiver 51. Seems kind of, okay, it's not a really high price player. Then you look at Demario Douglas on the same team, Pop Douglas, 175 overall, wide receiver 72. I just think he's super undervalued. That's what I take away from this. But like, Pop Douglas is a guy who I would totally be into buying, and it doesn't seem like it's going to take much than like a third or something like that. And I think he could have a fine career, fine year. He's going to be, a volume guy that you could shove in there. But I mean, these aren't guys, I guess, that you target often, but he just seems like he could potentially like lead the team in targets. You know what I mean? Like, he just seems kind of like a guy who could do that. I don't know.
No, I think that's 100% correct. I don't know if he will, but just based off of his usage last year in a really terrible wide receiver room, like, let's just be honest about that. When Juju Smith-Schuster is like contending for wide receiver 1, and like the corpse of Devontae Parker, was he even still there? Actually, I don't even know. I think he was.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately.
And then he retired. Like,
he stole money from us. That's what he did.
Yeah. Same, dude. I'm doing it every day. But but like the reality is that Pop Douglas is way too cheap, I think. Just given kind of the situation that lies, the familiarity with a lot of what will happen in the offense. I know that there's been turnover in New England, but I don't think it's going to be that drastic. I know a lot of people think it's going to be. And most importantly, think about Jacoby Brissett's usage, because that's who we know the quarterback is going to be for at least probably the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season. The dude loves a slot receiver. Like, he's just notoriously known for using slots. If you ever remember back to when Curtis Samuel had his like secondary breakout in his career in Washington, is with Jacoby Brissett. Jacoby Brissett loved slots in Indy. Like, it's just what the man loves, because they're really easy to get down to when you're an incredibly immobile quarterback like Jacoby Brissett. So like, that's just the reality of it. No hate, Jacoby, love you. But yeah, I think it's Pop by a pretty good margin. I also didn't really like Jalen Polk's profile, so I'd rather stay away at price. We've seen some really interesting wide receivers in that space. We just talked about Deontay Johnson. I'll pay Deontay plus a late third or a fourth for I'll pay.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yes. Yeah.
You'll pay Polk in a third or a fourth or whatever to get
exactly.
Deontay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, and I will clarify or just take it a little bit further with Pop Douglas. The goal may not to be keeping him on your team, right? It may be more, he's going to probably rise in value from there, and now I could liquidate for more than whatever I paid for him before. Yeah, so I think that's likely going to happen once the season gets going, and I know that, like Tommy's probably will listen to this and be like, these guys talking about these late wide receivers, we don't roster these guys. And it's true. Like, they're not providing much value, but for me, it's kind of a thing where you can acquire and flip. And I just see the value there because I think it's really, really cheap right now. So that's where I'm thinking about it. Okay, we got one more here, and we're going to move on. We'll go under the hood. Go into the Buffalo Bills. We'll end with a heater. Dalton Kincaid, 38 overall, tight end 3. All right, I'm going. This is all, by the way, Dynasty Data Lab. Great stuff. It's all coming from Sleeper. Dalton Kincaid, 38 overall, tight end 3. Keon Coleman, 76 overall, wide receiver 32. All right. This is one of the few where we've kind of crossed positions, right? This might be the only one actually we cross positions here. But I think it's interesting because the idea is that, there's nobody else there, and Kincaid is this absolute stud. But I mean, tight end 3 is just so pricey. I mean, man, I don't know. Like, I'll put it over to you because it's really just breaking my head right now. How do you feel about this? Like, Keon Coleman's not really that appealing either, I guess.
Yeah, I was going to say, the purpose of this segment is to pick the teammate that we prefer at cost. This is 2 guys that I don't prefer at cost at all. I probably prefer Curtis Samuel or Khalil Shakir in this setup than either of these 2 dudes.
And I want you to pick between them.
Fuck. All right.
Because basically it's going to be who do you believe in more to succeed, right? At that level.
Yeah. I think from a pure succeeding standpoint, I think Kincaid will, retain value at a better
that's
rate
what it's more about.
Than Coleman will. At least over the next 12 months. That's all I can try and predict through. And so from an ownership standpoint or an acquisition standpoint, I'd rather acquire Kincaid than acquire Coleman personally. What about you?
Yeah. That's exactly what I think as well. And I think that, I would just rather roster Kincaid obviously right now because I would rather trade Kincaid right now. But, I'm just looking at like what people are giving up for Kincaid and, George Pickens in a first for Kincaid, Trey McBride in a 25 first for Kincaid and a 24 first. I wouldn't really
it's a wash. Yeah.
Looking at that kind of deal. Yeah, man, damn. These trades a couple of days ago do not really impart tight end 3 value in my mind. Like Jacoby Myers, Jatavian Sanders, and Pat Freiermuth for Dalton Kincaid.
I'd acquire at that price.
I would 100% acquire at that price.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to wow. A 25 first and a third for Kincaid.
Say that one more time. Sorry.
A 25 first and a third for Kincaid.
Yeah.
Right? You have to. Tight end 3. Are you kidding me? If that's his value, I will buy him for that, and I will then sell him for, when we get into the season and he has one good game, because he'll have a good game. He's going to have a volume game. You know what I mean? You sell him. You can sell him for Mark Andrews plus sell him you do that kind of thing. And I think that's the idea. So yeah, I'd much rather have Dalton Kincaid at cost because it's just the value is so much more useful to you. And that is kind of an indictment on Keon Coleman, the idea that he probably can't reach that value, but is that silly of us? Because we probably thought Kincaid couldn't reach this value.
Yeah. I didn't think he would reach this value so quickly. I personally was a little bit higher than you on him as a rookie coming out of Utah. But with that being said, some of the meteoric rise of the tight end class right now from the last basically 2 seasons, you got McBride, Laporta, and Kincaid all sitting there, probably tight end 1 through 3, which is borderline insane, right?
Wow,
That's never really happened in the tight end space. You're talking about guys like Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce were dominating it for as long as they were. Maybe Kyle Pitts after his rookie year, but outside of that, it's going to be significantly tougher for someone even like a Brock Bowers to break through into that mold, just simply because there's just so much. There's just so many players in that space, right? It's kind of the similar conversation you're bringing up with Nico Collins, trying to get him into the top of that tier, like for that wide receiving group. Like it's so tough to find these like marginal gains, but I think the general theme of it will really just be down to understanding your own league and seeing if you can really benefit off of that. If you notice that folks are fading tight ends, I still think that there's a lot of value to being able to start a Kincaid and an Andrews in the same team, a Kincaid, potentially an Andrews and a Kittle or a Hawkinson, someone like that. Like that provides a huge marginal gain to your starting team than, majority of your competitors. And so maybe that's the pathway if you can, acquire a Kincaid at a first and a third value, something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I would look, I could move Keon Coleman for like Amari Cooper plus or something like that if I'm contending. Like I think that there's some potential there. There's a lot of, I think, different trades that you can make, or move from Keon Coleman to one of these tight ends, probably where I'd go, like a George Kittle plus or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
And really make it happen. I think that's kind of the move. Go cross positional, something that people kind of devalue a little bit. They really think Coleman's going to be that X for Buffalo, for Josh Allen, and then you're really making strides there, I think, and that's how you kind of make bones in Dynasty. So I guess that's where we'll leave it.
Bones. Yes.
Finish it, yeah, bro. Come on. Damn, Jay, you got to do me like that. All right. That will conclude our this edition of Family Feud. I actually
thanks, Steve Harvey.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, we'll try to bring this segment back next year, maybe when Uriah is with us, because that was a fun one. Get some more thoughts. All right, we're gonna go under the hood. The things we should be thinking about the things we are thinking about when we should be thinking about our wives. I'm trying to do it. All right, I'm trying to summon Uriah.
You're not him.
I'm not. I'm totally not. Okay. Tell me, what is the biggest change in your strategy or process since you've started playing Dynasty, Jake? What do you think it is?
Yeah, I think I pigeonholed myself a lot when I first started playing, in only acquiring assets that I like instead of acquiring assets that I think I can maneuver or better build my team around. There are players that fit into buy windows that needs to get taken advantage of. And I think that's kind of where I sit now, really understanding the entire market instead of just like, the window of players that Jake likes. What about you?
Yeah, I think like one of the biggest things for me is like I've been able to, over time, allow myself to give up on players much faster than I would when I started. And like that came, I think, a lot from understanding the hit rates. You know what I mean? Like once I learned that it was so unlikely for, certain profile players to hit, it was much easier for me to let go of my preconceived, bias and, my pre-draft take or whatever it is, because you really think you build a skill set and you really try to lean on it and you have success, and then you can get caught up in that. But I think, again, once you start learning, you gain more knowledge about the Dynasty space and about, career arcs and all that. And it makes it a lot easier to just let go, and it's really hard to do that, I think, in a game where you're making bets on players and there's emotion involved in it because you enjoy watching these guys, or there's a reason you fell in love with a guy in a draft, and it's hard to get out of that. So I think one of the biggest things for me was being able to let go of that. But also, over time, the other thing is I've been able to, we're talking about it with the Scott Fish Bowl. In the past, like when I really first started playing fantasy in general, I would stick to like a strategy I had when I went into a draft. And I realized that I was much more able to play the board and let things happen and adjust and let other people kind of make more mistakes. And where they're being more rigid in strategies and where I'm able to kind of be flexible. And that's really helped out a lot in Dynasty, of course, where you have more time to kind of be flexible and do those kind of things. And obviously in a draft, it's more static, but then you have the time after the draft where you really can allow yourself to kind of be flexible with your team build. And I don't think everybody is. A lot of people are like, I need running backs. I need, this, I need this. And it's like, you allow yourself, when you see people or when you see other managers stick to certain values and you're like, oh, I can take advantage of that. Like, you really want this, you really want that, I don't care. right? And when there's a lot of liberty in that, when like you're like you just let go and you're like I can do anything and kind of find success in any way.
It really is about adaptability, and I
Mhm.
agree. So much of a redraft mindset. I really took a long time to figure that out because all my brain is thinking about right now is rebuild, because it's so dynasty focused. But in
Yeah.
in a redraft mindset, you are thinking in such small windows of success, and so much of success is viewed around, like, really, in my opinion, 12-month windows instead of
Mhm.
a 3-month window. And being able to dictate what that looks like is a very unique experience because you have so much um, effectiveness in the way in which you kind of move assets around, to the point that it can sometimes become a liability if you don't really see what the grand picture is of what you're doing. But you know I've seen your portfolio because I'm a creep, but I also know, because I've talked to you. You've definitely grown a ton and understand this game really well, and I think it's really benefited you to be in it for as long as you have, because you've constantly gotten better year in and year out. And that's the other thing too, to the Tom Brady point versus Tony Romo. It's like, if you
Mhm.
don't continue to educate yourself throughout this process, then and you're not making big changes on a regular basis, um, you know you don't really adapt to the game and become proficient in it. So that's really
Yeah.
important.
And it's funny, I try to intake as much different knowledge and opinions and ideas as I can. And I don't try to necessarily like, here's my opinion, here's this other one. No, like, you know what I mean? And I'm not trying either way necessarily. I want it all to kind of seep in because it's useful knowledge. Like when you
Yeah.
realize a lot of people think a certain way and you think a certain way, you can either choose to adjust or not, right? And if you decide to be really discerning about it and read through everything and add all this context in and be like, okay, now I have this really full picture of kind of where everybody's at, what the actual situation is, and I can really make good decisions. Like that's always been part of my process in Dynasty because I started through Twitter and there's so many different opinions out there to digest, and that I think is a big part of it. You really do need to keep a clean but a diverse circle of ideas and opinions around you. But also just one other thing that continues to evolve for me, but Dynasty is what really brought it out of me because you maybe aren't. I mean, maybe you can do a lot of it in redraft. It just never hit me as hard as it did when I got to Dynasty, and it's something that you and guys like Tom, you really exposed me to more, and it's focusing on what others are doing and how that impacts what I am doing and how I should react to those things, right? Like there's a lot of useful, actionable items or things that can be done based on what your opponents are doing. And so many times we just like literally ignore that. And so that's something that continues to be added and continues to evolve in terms of how much I use it in the game every day, every year. And that's a really important piece of Dynasty that I don't think most are keyed in on initially when they get in. Okay. I thought you froze, Jake, but no, you're just like fuck you. Okay. All right. So should we be moving picks 3 years out? You see a lot of leagues on Sleeper, of course, with the 2026, 2027 picks available, ready to go. Uriah actually kind of this is it's the way he thinks about this spawned the idea in my head because he's like he hates doing it. He's like, why are we doing this? Those are so far out. Am I trading? If I'm trading it away, it's kind of at its lowest value right now, right? But it's also a potential way to get really high level points on your team too, because people really value those. And now you can get a really high end asset on your team that's scoring a bunch of points. So how do you kind of think about this in terms of, assuming we're paying for the year that we're sending away, obviously not assuming that this is going to cause a league to fold, but
Yeah.
are there advantages and disadvantages to this? Do you like doing this? How do you feel about trading these picks so far out?
Yeah, this all sparked from a trade that I made, which is hilarious that it's turned into an underdog under the hood situation. I don't even think I was on that episode to really counter what happened, but yeah, like
Oh yeah,
I
what
like
was
I
the
alluded
trade?
to.
What was that
I
trade?
think I alluded to it. It was like Tank Dell and Bucky Irving for a 27 first and
Right,
maybe like
right.
a fourth or something like that. And like the reality is for me that it's really when you sell any asset, you're selling them at that current cost. And I understand Uriah's point, but the value in which you're acquiring is really what you have to look at that specific moment. And if you think that you're acquiring an asset at an under cost, which is personally what I think I was acquiring Tank Dell and Bucky Irving at, then it makes totally enough sense because I think I can easily reacquire a random 27 first at any other time for Tank Dell. Like Tank Dell will never drop below a 27 first in the next 12 months, even if he tears his ACL. Like it's a God-given fact because of where he sits within that wide receiver room. It just is what it is. Like the only way that Tank Dell will lose the ability to be acquirable for 27 first is if he unfortunately passes away or he has a career-ending injury. Like,
yeah, let's go with that one.
Yeah, okay. The dude tears his Achilles, right? Like, God forbid. I really like the guy, and I don't want any of this to happen to him. But like, more so, like, we see this question happen so much, and it's not just about 27 picks. It's about just the acquisition of anything. And I think like we looked at it through the CJ Stroud trades, specifically between you and I, right? And so many people are really split on both of those trades because I think you see all of these assets, you see this thing or multiple things that could be acquired at any particular cost because they are more liquid. The idea that it's going to be something that it might not is not really up for my interpretation, and nor do I give two shits about it, to be completely honest with you. I know it sounds ridiculous, but that's just not how I play the game. Like I play the game to acquire and win now. Like that's what I want to do. And I do tend, and you've seen this, I do tend to trade away my future more often than not. And I do think that I end up competing at a really high level in almost every single league that I play at because I truly think I understand value relatively well. Now, that doesn't mean that will I end up losing that trade come 2027? Sure. But if I win the league for the next 3 years in 2024, 2025, 2026, and that 2007 pick turns into the 103 and Tank Dell ends up retiring at the age of 27, like, okay, cool. Like, what am I going to tell myself? Like, oh, holy shit, I lost the 103 for Tank Dell, but I just won, $2,000 over the last 3 years in this league. Like I can't look at things like that personally. And so I have to look at it in the moment when I'm sending out that pick or I'm acquiring something else. Like what am I doing and how am I kind of interacting in that space at that given time? The obvious disadvantage is that you just don't know what the valuation is going to be on that, but you sometimes don't know what the valuation is going to be on a 25 first. Like,
well, that's a great point. No, this is a great point. So in Console Wars, right? I remember I made a trade that I felt really bad about after I made it. And it was trading. This was in 2020. This was before this past season, before the season started. I traded my 25 first for CeeDee Lamb. And not mine. It was actually what we knew was going to be, both me and the trade partner knew was going to be a top 2 to 3 pick. So that's like, I'm trading a pretty solid quarterback in this upcoming class for CeeDee Lamb, and quarterbacks are super valuable. So I'm like, damn, like, okay. And I think it might have been the first plus like, some extra like back end picks or whatever it was. But we only have 125. I had acquired somebody else's first and I wasn't giving up. I think my other first, I was like, I'm not giving up 2 if I have to give up like the 103 or 102 for him. So there was like a little plus on it or whatever, but I was like, damn, dude, like, is this I won the league just once. I don't even care. I don't even care after that. I don't care what that could be the best player in the league for the next, it could be the best quarterback in the league. It might've been CJ Stroud, legitimately. That might've been who it was, right? Like, great. That's all it takes is one. You're talking about 3, Jake. One. That's all it takes is one time to get it right, and Uriah says all the time, the league might not even be alive by then. Well, so long as we paid for the buy-in for that year, even more of a reason to do it. You
Exactly.
know what I mean? Even more of a reason. Yeah. The world might not exist in 2028. So yeah, trade your pick. Like, let's make it happen. So for me, it's a super easy deal to make. It's a super easy asset to give up. It's a super easy asset to regain, like you're talking about, so long as you're not trading these picks for players who aren't going to hold their value at that guaranteed level, like Jake's talking about. Now, we have seen plenty of people in our listener leagues even trade their firsts loosely for players that are not going to maintain value very well, right? Who are just, dart throws. It's happened plenty. It really has in, across all the leagues. And so you definitely need to make sure you're doing it for, when you're doing it, you're getting something that is guaranteed to score you points and going to have multiple years of value, right? Once you do it that way, the risk is really, mitigated, I think. So I don't see so much issue with it. I do understand why it's kind of jarring, because you're like, it's like 3 years out. I don't even know what's going on. I don't know what's going to be happening by then. So I get it, but that's kind of the advantage. So I think you can take advantage of it,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right, we're gonna go to this last one here that you dropped for us, and I really, really love this question. I don't know why you had to use this acronym. It always confuses me, but what is your greatest what is your greatest defense mechanism to protect your squad from prey in Dynasty fantasy football? Thinking like a skunk spraying a scent or an armadillo's hard shell. This is a super, super interesting question. I'll give you my answer first because you did propose it. If that's the way you want this to go, unless you really, really wanted to give yours.
Give it to me sexy.
Okay, so I wrote some notes, but I think one of like where my head went was really kind of how people approach me for trades. And I literally went back into a DM and I found it and I screenshotted it and I'll send it to you later. But it was literally, I quoted it. They sent me a trade sending me nothing. When somebody sends you nothing, it's like
Yes.
not a zip zilch, whatever, for AJ Brown. And they said, quote, what are you looking for? Or what was that what it was? I think it was, what are you looking for X? Or like, what do you want to get this deal done? And I'm like, that's not how this is going to go. Like, it's like, I'm not going to put myself into a position where I'm giving away my information. I'm not going to do that. It benefits me in no way for you to come to me with nothing. Literally, you sent me nothing. And now you get what my value is. Like, no, come to me with an offer. You don't even need you can just send me, would you take X, Y, and Z? It doesn't need to be an official offer, but come to me with an idea, because I know what you're doing. This is a PSYOP mission. You are coming to get information, right? That's what it is. You aren't coming to have a good faith conversation. That's not what it is. So for me, I'm trying to really decipher when people are coming at me in a trade negotiation from a real, genuine perspective, or if they're coming at me sideways and really trying to take advantage of me. And there's ways to do this and not be like, that comes off as like insulting in a way, right? Like, it comes off insulting. Like, this another person sending me keep trade cut like images, like, bro, like this, like, I can't be involved in these. And so I'm actually thwarting those offers. I'm literally telling these people, like, this is not going to work. Don't engage with me this way, because we're literally not going to get things done. So that's kind of my defense mechanism, is like, I'm just going to push you away until you understand that there's just a better way to negotiate. There's another way to negotiate. And what that's going to do is make sure that most of the time, if they ever want to engage with me, I'm going to get an offer, and I'm going to at least play on my terms, not on their terms.
Yeah.
How about you?
That's awesome. I love that response. I guess my only follow-up would be, if you could, compare that to an animal, what animal would that be?
That's interesting. Oh, you got to give me a second to think. I don't
Sure.
know.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
think
don't
about it.
know.
Think about it.
Yeah,
No
yeah.
worries. Yeah, I'll
Uh,
give you mine. When I first thought of this,
okay.
I was kind of diving into like a lot of the lame psychology that I bring to a lot of trade negotiations, specifically, and because I do think that a lot of our defense mechanisms are built up in the way in which we interact with our league mates. And my biggest, I guess, edge or thing that I like to present are my babies. I think it's really important to think that everyone is accessible on my team. I think
Hmm.
that's kind of the way in which I protect the rest of my team, is by making individuals think that they can come to me to acquire other assets that they think are available. And we've talked about this a little bit with some of the trade nuance of like trade baiting or trade blocking, putting players out there for valuation when you're not actually trying to trade them. And like that's honestly what I think of when I think of defense mechanisms for my specific team. Is like, I want you to think that there is a player that's really interesting, but really they're kind of the guppy, or they're the imitation crab, and I'm the actual crab trying to actually kill you in this situation, because there's other opportunities for me to get the thing off of my team that I want to get rid of. Because we all have weaknesses on all of our teams. There's players that we've made, improper predictions on and profiles on that didn't necessarily land. And for me, I think it's really just about how to kind of negotiate and maneuver around individuals thinking that they're acquiring said asset when I'm going to try and move something else. So yeah, that would be me. I guess the best one would be what turtles typically do with their
Oh,
young. They do give birth to like a shit ton of eggs, but more often than not,
let
they'll
them
like,
go.
yeah, they truly let them go, and the
That's
ones that
amazing.
survive. But once they're in the water, like those parental turtles truly protect the young. They just don't protect the eggs.
Yeah, it's so great that you said this, because I make notes anytime almost anytime we're doing the show, but whenever somebody else asks me a question, I'm like, I got to make notes before I get on here. And literally what I wrote as another part of this was being so impartial that you're willing to move any player so you become impervious to different attacks.
Yep,
Right?
that's
That's
great.
literally what you're talking about. So you basically make it so that so others feel like they can come to you for assets that they can't get from others. Right? And
Yep,
it's really more just a feeling, because you've reeled them in now, and now you can kind of do what you want with them, because you've set up this atmosphere, right? So now again, you kind of want to make people play on your terms, play on your turf as much as possible, and not play on whatever terms that they're trying to work with. So many times, I mean, I have somebody in a C2 league, it's like, I have picks I need to get rid of because I can't make as many, and I'm like, oh, I have picks I get rid of, and the answer is, take a look at my team and let me know. All right, we'll see what happens. I guess nobody's getting these picks, because like, why am I doing the work? Like, when
yeah,
it comes time, like, somebody else is gonna make an offer most likely. So it's one of those weird things. But you asked me what animal it would be,
yes,
and I think pufferfish, because I get spooked quickly and my spice come out, like, with ferociousness.
that's
I'm like,
awesome.
no, this isn't gonna happen, and it's kind of quick. I notice it fast, and I'm not, it doesn't kind of linger, and I don't let it sit there. So I think that's how I feel about it. That was a great one, dude. That was a great segment. Like, I
That's
really
great,
love that.
awesome. Yeah, that
I
was
really
great.
love that.
Yeah,
Oh,
underdog
we
under
do
the
have a
hood,
trade.
never fails.
Never fails. No, underdog under the hood is undefeated, bro. Underdog under the hood is undefeated. Absolutely. Okay, we have one trade here. One trade here. This is an interesting one. Okay, I think we talked about this maybe in our in one of our chats. I'm not sure, but Ramondre Stevenson, big money, big bags, just got him for the rookie Blake Corum, a third. Whew, this is easy for me. I'll take the guaranteed Ramondre. I don't think the third is enough for me in sharing that backfield. You'd really have to bank on an injury, and yeah, for me, I just think that that Ramondre is going to be fed for the next couple of years and have a pretty solid production that's going to outmatch what Corum's going to give you. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, this seems really cheap for a guy who just agreed to a new contract. Yeah, we know there's some pretty obvious loopholes around a lot of that 3-year contract, but in the grand scheme of things, we know that it locks him up to probably be the guaranteed starter this upcoming season. And by starter, I mean like truly the dominant running back in that room. There really isn't anyone else competing. Like that is one of probably the worst running back rooms in the league.
Damn. Yeah, I mean Antonio Gibson is pretty mid, but he's okay.
Yeah,
that's it. That's the only two guys really.
Yeah. And like Antonio Gibson has value, but I wouldn't say he's necessarily taking away true carries away from Ramondre. No. It's just a different type of role. Obviously, the truly worst running back room in the league is the Giants. We all know that. Devin Singletary, Tyrone Tracy, Eric Gray. Who the fuck else cares? But yeah, I think this is smash on Ramondre.
Daniel Jones.
Obviously, this is a trade that we know a little bit more context, and given, what we just talked about in Underdog Under the Hood, this is honestly one of those where you can't let your ego go with potentially a trade partner that you don't like because you don't want to give them what they want. I think this is perfectly an example of how to stay amicable in a league with someone that you might not have great past experience with, so that they can feel like they have some interaction with you moving forward, even if you don't feel comfortable with giving up that third. I think I would probably just say, yeah, take it and move on with it just so that we can get that deal done.
Well, wait, the context is essentially somebody is super high on Corum, right?
The context is someone is super high on Corum.
And we already know that beforehand. Beforehand, we know Buddy is like eager to get Corum, but wants the plus on the other side, right? But wants
the plus on Corum because they're also relatively high on Stevenson, saying Stevenson's a true starting running back versus Corum doesn't have a role, etc.
Right. Yeah.
That's the context here. Yeah.
Yeah. It is. But you have to play off of those things. You have to play off of your opponent's feelings on the players, right? No matter what you feel. So, I mean, that's obviously very important in these negotiations. So, yeah. Also, both these guys are like the same age, aren't they? Like Corum's a rookie and he's like a year younger than Ramondre Stevenson. So, there's that factor in there as well for those that care. So yeah, I'll lean on the Ramondre side for sure. Okay. I think that's going to do it for us. This was a great show, man. I really enjoyed doing this with you. I'm happy you were here because I'd be doing this solo if you weren't. No, but I love talking to you. I love talking ball with you, man. And yeah, this is a great one. You brought some awesome stuff to Under the Hood. So thank you everybody for listening to this week's episode of Dynasty Underdog. Check us out on Spotify, anywhere you listen to your podcast. Follow us on Twitter at Dynasty Underdog, at Uri Dawkins, at Willie Beeman FF, at Jake Abrams. And also subscribe, like, YouTube page, all that good stuff. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We will catch y'all next time. Peace out.